Vlogmas Day 19.
Play in the snow. Put up the tree. Come back till Christmas with me.
Hey guys, it's Vlogmas Day 19, and we're gonna do some advent calendars and some reading, and I'm gonna show you what else I got from my kids at work. So here we go.
Or is it the 18th?
The
19th.
Okay. I was like, I think
Ready?
the 18th is yesterday. Yeah. Oh, I see it.
Okay, don't. Oh, there it is. It's a big one.
Big one.
Get your hands dirty. Feeling mud, leaves, and trees helps connect us with nature. Oh, a curler.
A curler?
Yeah.
For eyelashes?
For eyelashes.
Well, I'm not going to use that.
Oh.
I'm terrified.
Okay guys, so here's what I got. I got some gingerbread cookies with a card from this little boy named Jackson in my class with $40 in it. How cool is that? Then I got a little card from this little girl named Lila with $25 in it. Like, what's with all this cash? It's crazy. Spoils. They're all spoiling me. And then I got this card with Santa on it with a $20 Target gift card, which is so cool. So yeah, those are the cards that I got. And then I got this, which is like a little set. It's a scarf and some gloves. So that's pretty cool. So those are all my presents. Right, guys, tonight we're going to read a story called The Elves and the Shoemaker. Once upon a time, long ago, there lived a shoemaker. He was an honest shoemaker and worked very hard, but no matter how hard he tried, he only got poorer and poorer. One day he had nothing left but a bit of leather, just enough for a pair of shoes. That night, before going to bed, he cut the leather into pieces. He would use the leather the next day to make his last pair of shoes. He laid the pieces carefully on his workbench. "Tomorrow I will wake up early and be ready to make my shoes," he said. Then he and his wife left the shop and went home to eat a small meal and go to bed. The next morning, when the shoemaker and his wife returned to the shop, they found that the pieces of leather were no longer on the workbench. Instead, to their surprise and joy, there was a beautiful new pair of perfectly made shoes. The shoemaker looked at the shoes and he found that they were much better than any he had ever made. "Who could have done this?" wondered the shoemaker's wife. In a short while, an elegant man entered the shop. He tried on the shoes and was so pleased that he offered a handsome price for them. The shoemaker took that money and bought enough leather for 2 pairs of shoes. That night, the shoemaker again cut out the leather for the shoes to make the next day. He carefully laid the pieces out on his workbench and went home. The next morning, when he and his wife returned to the shop, there were 2 pairs of shoes waiting on the workbench. These shoes were more beautiful than the ones they had found the day before. Soon, a fine man and an elegant lady came into the shop. "What lovely shoes!" exclaimed the lady. She and the gentleman were so delighted that they paid an even higher price for the shoes than the man of the day before. Now the shoemaker was able to buy enough leather to make 4 pairs of shoes. And so it went, night after night. The shoemaker would cut the leather for more and more shoes. He would carefully lay out the pieces, and each morning there would be rows of handsome shoes waiting on his workbench. The word spread all around the countryside about the shoemaker's fine shoes. People began coming from far and wide to see for themselves and to buy shoes at his shop. Before long, the shoemaker and his wife were no longer poor. In fact, they were becoming very rich indeed. They had enough money to eat well and buy new clothes. They could hardly believe their good fortune. Then one evening, a few weeks before Christmas, the shoemaker said to his wife, How I would like to know who is making such fine shoes for us. Let's stay awake tonight and find out." "An excellent idea," said his wife. "I would love to know who has been helping us all these nights." So the shoemaker and his wife went to the shop that very night. They took a candle and set it on the table near the workbench. "We must hide ourselves," said the shoemaker. They crouched behind some clothes hanging in the corner of the room where they waited. At the stroke of midnight, as the shoemaker and his wife watched, two little elves wearing thin and tattered clothes came into the shop. They immediately jumped onto the bench and began their work. How their fingers flew as they stitched and hammered and pounded away! The shoemaker and his wife could hardly believe their eyes. The elves did not stop until the leather was made into shoes. When they had finished with their work, they swept up all the scraps of leather and left the workbench as they had found it. Then in a twinkling they jumped down and scurried out of the shop. The next morning the shoemaker's wife said, "Those two little elves have done so much for us. We should make a gift for them to show our thanks. They must be cold with their ragged clothes, so I'll make them two little suits and hats. Will you make 2 tiny pairs of boots for them?" "Of course," said the shoemaker, so they set to work to make clothes for the elves. The wife made 2 handsome coats of green wool. Then she sewed 2 tiny shirts of the finest cloth. She made 2 little hats trimmed each one with a jaunty feather, and she knitted 2 pairs of warm stockings. The shoemaker sewed 2 pairs of little boots. That night they laid out their gifts on the workbench. At midnight, sure enough, the 2 little elves came skipping into the shop, ready for work. They looked at the workbench, expecting to find pieces of leather to make into shoes, but when they saw the beautiful tiny clothes, they were puzzled at first. Then their surprise turned to delight. They quickly began to dress themselves in the suits, shirts, little hats, and boots. As they put on their clothes, they started to dance a lively jig. They hopped about and clapped their hands with glee. Then they began to sing, "Now we are jaunty gentlemen. Why should we ever work again?" As soon as they were dressed, they started dancing faster and faster. They hopped and laughed and sang until at last they twirled right out of the door of the shop. The shoemaker and his wife watched them dance down the snow-covered moonlit path. The shoemaker smiled and said, "I wonder if we'll ever see them again." "Perhaps not," answered his wife, "but how glad I am we were able to repay them for all they have done for us. This is our happiest Christmas ever." The shoemaker and his wife never did see the 2 little elves again. From that day on, though, the 2 of them had very good luck in all that they did, and they never forgot those who had helped them when they needed it the most, the 2 little elves. Alright guys, that was our story for tonight, and tomorrow night's story is Little Drummer Boy, so get ready for that one. Good night guys!